Welcome, everyone. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks so much for joining us. The time now is 12:30 in New York and 10 p.m. here in New Delhi. Let's now listen into U.S. President Donald Trump speaking in New York.
A lot of presidents and leaders of countries that have been friends and have become very good friends of mine. And we have great trade relationships, other than the fact that we are right now being taken advantage of, but I think they'll start changing them pretty quickly. Key administration officials, including Secretary Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, will be staying back from the trip to Asia to remain vigilant and making sure the tax cuts pass. So if I have any problems, I will be blaming Mnuchin and Cohn. Believe me, they'll be hearing from it. But I think they're going to do very well. We are doing very well. And the Houses, I must tell you, they've been working really hard. And they're coming up with a great plan. And the Senate's coming up with a great plan. And they're going to be put together, and something's going to come out of that will be, I think, really something very special. Again, we're doing Senate, we're doing a House. It's put together, and then we have our beautiful new tax cuts and reform. And I think it'll be very special. I'm also counting on our great Vice President, Mike Pence, and the rest of my cabinet to continue to push for the tax cuts and the reform while I'm away. And they're going to be all over the country. They'll be all over the country working on it. But specifically, they'll be working on the members of the House, members of the Senate. We think we'll actually get some Democrats to join us in the Senate because, frankly, I actually think they'll lose their elections in those communities and those states because the people of those states and the people of all states need tax cuts. Again, we're the highest taxed nation just about in the world. We need tax cuts. So with that, we will start our cabinet meeting. We have a wonderful group of people. We have a great cabinet. They're doing an incredible job. I don't think actually they've been given the credit that they deserve, but that doesn't matter quite yet. We'll let you know when it's time to tell you about it. But we have done. At the border, we've done a fantastic job. We've done great with the military. ISIS is being decimated. They're being decimated. But they quickly moved to other places in the world, like Africa and others, and we're there to meet them. This has never happened. We have done more to annihilate ISIS than 8 years of the previous administration. So we are doing a real job. We're actually making tremendous strides in Afghanistan also, and I think you see what's happening. You see what's happening. So we have to get much tougher. We have to get much smarter, and we have to get much less politically correct. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to do anything. And that's not only our country, that's other countries too that are having very similar problems. And we have to get tough, we have to get smart, we have to do what's right to protect our citizens. We will never waver in the defense of our beloved country, ever. And we'll never, ever forget the beautiful lives that have been taken from us. That was a horrible event, and we have to stop it, and we have to stop it cold. We also have to come up with punishment that's far quicker and far greater than the punishment these animals are getting right now. They'll go through court for years. At the end, there'll be who knows what happens. We need quick justice, and we need strong justice. Much quicker and much stronger than we have right now. Because what we have right now is a joke, and it's a laughing stock.
That was U.S. President Donald Trump speaking in Washington, D.C. on this most recent terror attack in New York City. Trump also said the country will terminate the U.S. green card lottery program. Speaking to the media, President Trump said that he will take the necessary steps to protect the United States. Let's now go straight to a correspondent on the ground there in New York City, Andy Rosegan, joining us now live from the area where all of this happened. Andy, it's still early on there. It's the afternoon. People getting out and about for lunch. What's the mood like? What's the scene like a day after Halloween? What officials are now calling the worst terror attack in New York after 9/11?
The feeling is tense, Archith, actually. Right now, I'm at the very base of that bike path where this attack happened yesterday. You can see this is the bottom end of this long bike path where this occurred, and police have sealed off that area, as you see here. And just as an aside, I'll point out that right now we are just about a block away from One World Trade Center, which we don't know if actually that had a role in all this, part of the motivation for Mr. Sayela Saipov, who's been accused of this attack. But police have sealed off this area, and a few minutes ago they had dozens and dozens of men and women in white lab coats, full-body lab coats, walking step by
All right, we'll hopefully try to get our connection back with Andy Rosegan there in New York. In the meantime, the latest information that we have of this hour, 8 people killed in New York when a 29-year-old Uzbek national drove his truck through a bike path near the World Trade Center around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was Halloween for many people in the United States, right before many of those kids go trick-or-treating, and unfortunately innocent bystanders, the latest victim. And this type of thing really hasn't happened in the United States, using trucks as weapons of terror. Let's take a look at exactly what happened, how all of this unfolded, and what officials are now calling the worst terror attack in New York after this incident.
Halloween turned out to be truly horrific for New Yorkers on Tuesday. In what is being described as the worst terror attack in the city since 9/11, a man drove a truck into a crowd, mowing down 8 people and injuring several others. In a matter of minutes, a popular bike path in Lower Manhattan turned into a scene from a horror movie. Crumpled bicycles lying on the street were a tragic reminder of the extent of the damage.
We saw the car and it was like surrounded by rubble, and we saw like this. Yeah, we saw the guy. He looked like he was wearing like dark colors, and I think he had a beard, but he was holding 2 guns. So yeah, it's a little scary.
I don't know. We've been through 9/11, so I mean, but now this truck thing and the cars, using cars against people. I mean, I walk up that road every day, you know, to go to wherever, and it's, I mean, you just have to be very, very careful and vigilant all the time.
Hey, can I get the kids out?
The carnage ended when the driver smashed his truck into a school bus.
Oh my God. Horror. Holy shit.
Jumped out and ran up and down the highway, waving a pellet and paintball gun and shouting Allahu Akbar. Minutes later, he was shot in the stomach by a police officer. The attacker has been identified as 29-year-old Saifullo Saipov. He came to the United States in 2010 from Uzbekistan and has been living in New Jersey, but had an address in Florida.
I'm in complete shock, just total shock. I walk my dog. I've been here for 4 years, and I just would say hi, and he said hi a couple times. What a tragedy this was, a horrible day on such a fun day of joy for millions of kids, made even worse because it literally hit.
6 months ago, Saipov began driving for Uber in New Jersey. According to Uber, he passed a background check and did not have any rider complaints about his safety as a driver. He has now been banned from the Uber app. Saipov rented the killer truck just an hour before the attack and drove it down from New Jersey. Handwritten notes in Arabic discovered near the vehicle indicated allegiance to the Islamic State. But in the absence of any direct link, investigators are treating it as a case of an inspired attacker. 5 of Saipov's victims were Argentine tourists who had traveled to New York for a 30-year high school reunion. A 6th deceased was a Belgian national. In the wake of the attack, US President Donald Trump vowed to step up extreme vetting of people entering the country.
It's a very painful day in our city. Horrible tragedy on the West Side. Let me be clear that based on the information we have at this moment, this was an act of terror, and a particularly cowardly act of terror aimed at innocent civilians, aimed at people going about their lives who had no idea of what was about to hit them. We, at this moment, based on the information we have, we know of 8 innocent people who have lost their lives.
New Yorkers made it clear that they refused to be intimidated. Thousands lined up the streets for a Halloween parade. With a spirit of camaraderie and strength, New Yorkers came out in droves, determined to overcome the tragic event. Bureau Report, WION.
All right, let's go back straight to a correspondent on the ground there in New York City, Andy Rosgan, at the attack site where all this unfolded around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Halloween. Andy, you told me a few minutes ago that the police presence is stepping up. They've sort of blocked that area. What is the chatter like? Are people back and out and about in the street? Is there a little bit of an eerie silence? Give us the sense there on the ground as you are picking things up.
Well, actually not much silence right now, Archie. There is a helicopter above us, a police helicopter. You might be able to see it there, kind of scanning the area. A total blanket of police officers and FBI terrorism task force folks. Can't quite see them here, but blanketing all the way down the street, trying to keep things safe. There is a high school near here, and today they stepped up security there as well. They've got 3 counselors on hand. So it is affecting a lot of people. I talked to several people who said that they kind of expected this. This is the way of the world we live in right now, and there's not much you can do about it. They're just trying to go about their daily lives as best they can.
Absolutely. All right, we'll come back to you, Andy, in just a bit. In fact, now let's also listen into U.S. President Donald Trump. He spoke a short while ago in Washington, D.C., addressing a host of issues and, of course, touching on this attack, in fact, calling the suspect an animal.
We have to get much tougher. We have to get much smarter, and we have to get much less politically correct. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to do anything. And that's not only our country, that's other countries too, that are having very similar problems. And we have to get tough, we have to get smart, we have to do what's right to protect our citizens. We will never waver in the defense of our beloved country, ever. And we'll never, ever forget the beautiful lives that have been taken from us. That was a horrible event, and we have to stop it, and we have to stop it cold. We also have to come up with punishment that's far quicker and far greater than the punishment these animals are getting right now. They'll go through court for years. At the end, there'll be who knows what happens. We need quick justice, and we need strong justice, much quicker and much stronger than we have right now. Because what we have right now is a joke, and it's a laughing stock.
Now, what's interesting in all of this is New York's governor and mayor say they're not really concerned that U.S. President Donald Trump did not call them. But the governor of New York did say that President Trump's tweets, in fact, were not necessarily factual or helpful in the investigation. Something UK officials also said when Trump talked about the situation in London. Let's go back to Andy Rosgan in New York City. We also heard from Trump talking about extreme measures of vetting to make sure that such radicalized folks do not enter the country, especially after what he says the U.S. has defeated ISIS in the Middle East. They don't want that to happen on U.S. soil. What could this mean? What are the next steps? Is it going to be more difficult for migrants to enter the United States?
Well, it's kind of unclear what has happened because Trump earlier today talked about what's called the diversity lottery visa, a way to allow folks from countries that don't necessarily have a lot of links to terrorism or not on the terror watch list, a chance for those folks to get into the country. And he blamed a Democrat, the Democratic leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, for pushing that program, which is rather controversial, which allowed this Mr. Saipov to get into the country from Uzbekistan. It's kind of confusing, but there's confusion over whether that really was how this gentleman got into the country. So at the very least, what Trump has talked about today has set off another back and forth over immigration laws in general. So the short answer, Archie, is that we just don't know yet how this might eventually, down the road, might affect immigration for folks who want to come in, either from Uzbekistan or India or from wherever.
Andy, the big question is, after the Las Vegas attack at the beginning of October, we heard the active shooter, the mass shooting, but we didn't hear the word terror. We didn't hear terrorism. This one, a little different. 8 people killed. Still a lot of lives, not as many as 58, but quickly the T word appeared. Was it because he was of a different ethnicity? Was it because he said Allahu Akbar? Why the difference? I mean, is that an interesting development on how different attacks are labeled terror or not?
That's a very interesting question, and that's the eternal question, Archer. The truth is, the definition for a terror attack is still kind of vague. Basically, it comes down to an attack based on an ideology, which apparently the Las Vegas shooter did not have, and apparently by the evidence gathered at the scene that this gentleman had a 15-page manifesto of some kind talking about ISIS, and that sort of thing, and of course shouting out God is great in Arabic. Yes, that is what leads people down the road of the word terrorism. So it is a vague question, and I think that's probably why. The fact that he left this memo behind that talked about an ideology adhering and being a part of ISIS. By the way, Archis, I should also mention that we heard this morning from the former police commissioner of New York, Raymond Kelly, who said that, this is according to him, he said that this suspect, Mr. Saipov, in the hospital, when investigators talked to him and asked him about this, they said he showed no remorse for what he did along this street yesterday. They said that he actually wanted to kill more people, that he was sorry that he didn't kill more people. A very aggressive way that he had in this talk that he did with investigators. So that's something to consider as well. Police will certainly dig into his background. His friends have said that he was a nice guy. His friends in Florida and Ohio said that he was nice, a gentleman, a married guy with children. They said he was a bit isolated, and one said over the radio today in a radio interview that apparently Mr. Saipov became a little more aggressive about his feelings about religion and such. That's something that surely investigators will be looking at all day and in the coming weeks.
All right, Andy Roskin giving us the very latest there. Andy, of course, we'll check in with you as the new details emerge. Of course, the big question is why, and of course, once he's out, what type of charges he will face. Andy, thank you for all those updates.